All right, well, thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to talk about database libraries and primarily how do we install them in Altium Designer. I'll also talk a little bit about what they are. But one of the big objectives of this video is to try to remove some of the fear, some of the myths, some of the concerns that people have regarding database libraries, because they're very, very powerful libraries. But I think people, when they contemplate these type of libraries, think of massive corporations with very, very large multi-million-dollar MRP systems with departments of 20 or more people running these things as a full-time job. And granted, they do exist, but that's not what we need. And yes, you could hook Altium Designer into an MRP system, but that's way beyond the scope of what we're trying to do today. So what we just want to simply show you is how do you hook up a database into Altium Designer, and we're going to show an example that Altium already provides in its example list. Okay. So what we need to do first is we need to download the example package. Now, in prior versions of Altium Designer, this was already provided to you. It was provided to you in the program files under Altium Designer. You went into examples and they had all these additional examples, one of which was a file called the CIS. Now, in Altium Designer 10, they do provide some examples. However, it's not the complete list, and you need to go onto the wiki in order to get these examples. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to bring up the wiki. All right. And I'm going to go to, well, right now I'm going to bring up Firefox, and then I'm going to go to Altium.com. And once we're on the Altium.com page over here, we're going to go to Community, and we're going to go to Altium Wiki. All right, now there's two places that you can type this in. One of them is over here where it says Altium Documentation, and one of them is up here saying, which is called Search Confluence, which I believe is the backbone of the wiki engine that Altium uses. Now, just to forewarn you that if you type it over here and we say examples, you may get an odd response. Okay, and you can see the odd example that we get here. We'll have no fear if we go to the top right corner and we type in examples. Okay, it will bring up the list, and the one at the very top is the one that we want. It says download examples and reference design. So we'll click on this. All right, and you'll notice that there are two listings over here. One of them is the all examples in a single file, or all reference designs in a single file. You simply need the all references in a single file, and you click on this and you'll download it. Now, for our purposes, we've done that already for you so that we don't have to spend the time watching this download. Okay. Let's click over here. Now, one thing I'll also mention is that, of course, in prior versions of before Altium Designer 10, everything was stored in program files Altium Designer. However, after Microsoft 7 and even Windows Vista had come out, Altium realized that they couldn't really store these things in the program files directory because of the securities that Microsoft had put on the program files directory. So they put it in a new location. And one place that you can take a look at if you want to see where your existing examples directory is to look in the preferences. So if we go to DXP preferences here and we click on preferences up here, okay, and what we're going to do is we want to open up the systems folder and then click on default locations, which happens to be up already. You can see where Altium has this default library path and its default document path, and you'll notice that it's under user public documents. It's also under something called My Documents if you're in Windows Explorer, okay, and then under Altium, and again Altium Designer 10, and then examples. Now again, these are the default examples. They're primarily FPGA examples. So if you're going to download from the wiki, you'll want to add those other example files that you've already downloaded into this area right here. Okay, so we already have them there, and this is just something for your reference. And let's take a look at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the Windows Explorer. Okay, I'll bring it over here, and we're going to go into our documents. All right, Altium Designer, AD10, and we have our examples over here. Now we have a number of different examples, but I'm going to click into the examples here, and you're going to see something called CIS. Okay, and I'm going to double click into this, and I'm going to double click into the example dblib. Okay, so these are the basic components that are necessary in order to have a database library. The first one here that we'll look at is this file that ends with the .dblib. This is a link file, and we'll take a look at this in a few moments, but this is the file that tells Altium what they're looking at and what to link up to and how the fields are supposed to match up. And we'll go into more details again in a few minutes. The second one is that this is a .mdb file. So this is a Microsoft Access file. All right, and you can use Excel as well, but for this demonstration, since it's already set up, we will use Access. But just keep in mind that Excel can be used. The only problems that you tend to have with Excel is that even if you're just a one-man band, Altium and Excel could have problems trying to open the file at the same time. Either one has possession and the other one wants it, or vice versa. And this is especially true if Altium is already linked to that library and it's looking at the Excel file. If you try to make an edit to it, then Excel is going to complain that it doesn't have rights to the file. So it's a little easier to use Microsoft Access because of that sharing issue. Okay. The libraries themselves are over here. So here's for the PCB library, and there's also the one for the schematic library. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in the Access database just to show you what it looks like and some of the more pertinent information that you need to have when putting together a database. So here's the one that Altium provides. It happens to be a .mdb file. Let's lock this thing up here. Okay, and you'll see that there's a lot of information over here. It looks really large. It almost looks very complicated. But most of this information here is not critical. It's really just more information to make sure that the individual who's going to use this part has the ability to create a bill of material. And that's one key aspect of the whole idea of database libraries. Really, the information in the library is there for the use of the bill of materials. In fact, that's really the driving force as to why Altium does not allow for parameters on the PCB side of things. It only allows for parameters on the schematic side of things. So here's the database that Altium provided. And what's really interesting about this is that if you really look at it, there's only 5 columns of information that we need in order to actually create a database. The first one is a unique part number. You definitely want to have something that's unique. The part number is what's called a key field, and it has to be unique. Just by definition, that's how all databases work. If there's duplicate records, that causes problems. So the idea is that the part number, which is the key field, must be a unique field. Okay? And you can see all the parts right here that are listed. The other ones that are required are basically linked to both the symbol and the footprint. So now you have the library reference. Okay? And so the library reference is just the name of the part. So this is the part that's in that library, and here's the path as to where that library is located. Now notice that this is not an absolute path. This is a relative path. Okay? So that means that you have your database on a higher level, and below that, that's where your libraries are located. All right? Now, can you have absolute paths? Yes, you can. Can they be in a completely different location? Certainly you can. It's not that Access does not care about where this path is. All right? This is really for the purpose of Altium to know where this path is. Okay, so you can put whatever path is here as long as it adheres to the Microsoft standard for creating paths. Okay? And the same thing for the footprint and for the footprint path. Now, one thing I should go back and mention is you'll notice this does not say symbol reference or symbol library. It says library ref and library path. But these are known to Altium. They're key fields that are necessary in order for Altium to find the symbol and to find the footprint path. The rest of the information that you see over here is information that, again, you can add. It will be populated automatically in the parameters. Okay? And if you do have things like for simulation or signal integrity, you can also have these. These are also special parameters as well. Okay? But you can add as many parameters as you so see fit. So if you want the address of the manufacturer, if you want a vendor name or a point of contact, you can easily add that in. All right? And one of, of course, the big advantages of that is that if you did need to add that in, it's very easy to add a new field in here. Okay, you can simply right-click and you can insert a field, and you can do your standard copy and paste so that that field populates very quickly. Now, in Microsoft 2007 Access and beyond, they made it very easy to populate these tables. In the past, you used to right-click so that you could have an editable field, and they made it very difficult for you to change these because they were very concerned about you changing the data in that. But they changed that up a bit in, again, Access 2007, so that it's very easy to work in these fields and to make it a little more enjoyable rather than a very frustrating process to work in Microsoft Access. Okay, so that's what we've got over here. Now the question is, we've got this information. How does Altium take it and link it and make it a part of their library? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to minimize this and we're going to jump back into Altium Designer. And first and foremost, let me kind of show you the end result and then we'll kind of pick it apart. So in order for me to even see that library, I need to put this into my libraries panel. Okay, here's the libraries panel. I'm going to right click on libraries. Okay, and I'm going to get available libraries and I'm going to tell it to install. So I'm going to click over here. Now it already jumped over to this area because we were already set up before, and if you have to, you will have to navigate to where you put your database library. We just happen to have it all set up so that it will jump to that correct directory. But you can see a couple of things here. Now if you don't see it here, by default this will probably say integrated libraries.intlib. So if you don't see something here, make sure you click on this button here to say, well, we want to take a look at all files. The one that we want to click on is the vishay capacitor.dblib. Okay, and we're going to press open. And now it's been added in here, and I'll press close. Okay. I'll go over here because right now it's showing the miscellaneous devices integrated library, which is one of the default libraries Altium provides. I'm going to right click, and now you see the 3 tables that were available in Microsoft Access. And if I didn't show that, let me bring back Access here for a moment so you can see that. So here we go. You'll notice that here this table is the capacitor, the ceramic one, the electrolytic one, and the tantalum one. So you can have a number of different tables within the same Microsoft Access file. Now one note that I will make is that as far as I know, up to this point, Altium is not able to read queries, it's not able to read linkages, and I know that there's a difference between the flat and the associated databases. The fact of the matter is that Altium can only read what you call a flat database, and that means that all the information here has to be in the same table. I know that in Microsoft Access you can do things called relational databases where one database has strictly one piece of information and another one has strictly another piece of information, and you're able to link them all together so it looks like one table. And unfortunately Altium would not interpret it that way. They would simply look at all these as individual tables and would not understand the links between them. And hopefully in the future they would be able to read those, but for now you'll have to treat this as what they call a flat database. All the information has to be in the same table. Okay. In terms of, for the tantalum, all the tantalum information has to be here. For the electrolytic, all of its information could be here. In theory, all these could be combined together as one large table, but the idea is that you can't have some information in the tantalum that's dependent upon some information in the electrolytic table. So let's bring this over here, and again let's bring this up and let's change to the ceramic table. So now notice that all the information that's up here in the part number and the library ref is information that comes directly from Access. This symbol over here comes from the library, but here's the interesting part. You notice as I keep pushing down my down button, I'm sifting through the part numbers over here. This doesn't change. Why is that? Because all these parts, and there's probably, there's 443 parts according to what's on my other screen over here. All 443 parts point to the exact same symbol, and that's a huge savings of time. And not only a huge savings of time, it also ensures that people aren't trying to recreate and draw their own symbols. Because if everybody's doing their own different symbols, it gets very, very difficult to create a central library where everybody's making contributions to it. Okay. So you can see they're all the same. Yes, the footprints will definitely change, all right, because these are different sizes, but the symbol remains the same. Now let's place one down just to see what it looks like once we place it. Let's do a File, New, Schematic. Okay, I'll bring my library back up here and I will lock it down. And I'm going to just take one at random over here and I will hit the place button. Okay, and I will place it down. I'm going to right click to end it. I'm going to page in, or page up, pardon me, and I will double click on it to look at its properties. All this information that you see over here, again, comes from the database. These are all the columns that were listed in the database. It does not come from the part itself. Okay, the part itself is strictly just a graphical representation. It will have a designator, but it will not have anything more than just the bare bones basic graphic. The rest of this information came from the database. Okay. Alright, so that's all we need to do in order to place a part from the database. Now the question that is probably in your mind is, alright, that's fine and dandy. How do we get Altium to even link to this? How do we create these things? And that's what we're going to demonstrate right now. As I mentioned earlier, you need to have something called a .dblib file. Okay, and this is the link file. We're going to open that up right now. So I'm going to go to File, Open. Okay, and I'm going to go into Examples, CIS, Example DBlib. Okay, And here it is, vishay-capacitor.dblib. I'm going to open this up, right? And here it is in my projects panel. And this is the general information that you will find. So it'll ask you to select a certain type of database. So here are the options that you have for like Microsoft Access and Access 2007, also for Excel as well. And here's the path for it, okay? And you can always browse to it to tell it where it might be if it's not there in the default directory. There's also options for connection strings or to use a data link file. The connection string is primarily for those things. You can see it kind of faded here. They're for things that, for the larger servers, if you're going to an iServer or you're going to one of these really large MRP systems, yes, Altium can link into it. That will require you to talk with your IT or your administrator for that system, because if Altium just tries to link to it directly, it's going to try to read everything, and that could be millions upon millions of data links and information. It'll lock up Altium for minutes, if not hours at a time. So it's really important that if you're going to do this, that you work with your administrator, because they might be able to point you to a very specific table for your information, or they may also point you to what's called a data link file. And what's really nice about a data link file is that instead of trying to access everything directly, what they can do is they can do a data dump of the information that you want and put it in such a way that you're not going to have to access it, and that it can take it in a smaller chunk rather than having to try to navigate some massive set of tables. Okay? But right now we're going to use Microsoft Access, and just by you saying it's Access, and as long as Altium can read the .mdb file, you're good to go at this point. And you can see over here with the database field names are literally those things that are the columns in Access. So library path, footprint path, component path, and so on and so forth. Those are all listed here. These are the design parameters that are going to be used. They're basically the labels for all the parameters that would show up in your component. And for the most part, they're going to be the exact same thing. But if you want to change the name of these, you feel free to do so. The only time where this becomes important where you don't touch them is, for example, for the footprint path and ref, and for the symbol path and the ref. Okay, so that's how this is correlating to each other. These are the things in the columns, and these are the parameter names that it's going to pour out to. Where this gets kind of important later on is that if you're trying to do an update, and if these already exist, then Altium knows, saying, hey, this database field is related to this, and so on and so forth. If it's brand new, it just populates it with this information. Now the field settings over here, and I did skip over this, but there's a really important part that I want to discuss with you, is that these are how the key fields are supposed to link up. So the database field, its key field is called part number. And the second one for the part number itself, by default, is part number as well. But if you had something else called like company part number or something else, you can tell Altium saying, look, our key field is called the company part number, and you can list it. But that's how Altium can convert the record. In Access, a record is a row. So for example, this over here is a record because it's a row of information. And it's basically saying, how do I take this row of information and bring it into Altium Designer? How do I know I want this row? Well, it knows to take this row because on the part number over here, this would match up to whatever the key parameter is for that component. And it would take the rest of this information and populate it in. So that's why that key field has to be unique, and that's why that key field has to be known. Okay? You don't have to have a key field in Access, but you would be doing yourself a great disservice by not having it there. And the same thing with Altium Designer. Okay. The other thing that you'll see is a table browser down here, and the table browser is basically the exact same table that you saw in Microsoft Access. Okay, it's just showing you that yes, Altium can see your table. Okay, but in the end, this is what you need in order to tell Altium how to hook up to the database library. And by setting this up and saving it, you can go over here to your libraries panel, tell it, hey, bring up this dblib, and Altium will be able to do the rest of the work for you. All right, now that I've shown you how to just use the dblib that's already been created for you in the example, I will open up a new one and show you how to link to the existing database library. So let's go to File, New. Okay, we're going to go to Library, and then over here in the library, we're going to go to Database Library. Now, actually, this brings up a good point since I see it over here. There is something called the Subversion Database Library. It is somewhat the same in the sense that, yes, you would also have to use Microsoft Access to track this, The difference is that rather than having the files outside in the directory system like we're using for the database library, these would be kept in a Subversion database library. There's advantages and disadvantages to it. The one disadvantage, which I personally do not like, is the fact that with Subversion database libraries, Altium Designer will split every single library into its own part. So every single part has its own library. And the whole purpose behind that is to have version control for both the symbol and the footprint. Though to be perfectly honest with you, in most situations that I've seen, once a footprint and a symbol have been drawn, they really don't get modified or changed thereafter. So it makes for really a lot of work. I know that Altium has created other library systems that work well with this whole composite library. But for what we're trying to do, we're simply going to keep with a database library. Okay? So I wanted to create the new database library, and this is the shell of it. Okay, so again, it doesn't know what we want, so we need to first tell it where to look, and we'll see things populate as we go along with it. So we are going to use Microsoft Access, and we need to give it a path, so we'll click on Browse, okay, and we'll go into Documents, Altium, Altium 10, Examples, Examples again, CIS, Examples DBlib, okay, and then we do see our .mdb file. If we don't see it, make sure that you click down here for all files, okay. And by the way, one other note, that if you are using a newer version of Access, it's not .mdb anymore, it's a larger extension. So we will click on this and we'll open it. All right. And then we'll click on Connect. All right. And you'll see that it read the file, that we were successful in reading the file here. Up here, make sure that you check the database field name for part number, okay, because they're showing you all the different columns that are available here. We do want to use part number. That is the key field for what was put in that database. And over here, if we did have different parameters, usually this is not for the DBlib, it's for DBlink, which I'll explain possibly in another video. But the idea here is to make sure that we are using something as the primary field. Again, I guess where I want to make this key field really important is that the first time we put down a part, it really doesn't matter because we're just taking data from Microsoft Access and putting it into the component. Later on, if we're trying to update the component, then it's really important to know what the key field is so that the right columns of the database get matched up with the right parameters that are already in existence of the component. So as I said, the initial placement of these, it doesn't matter, but later on it certainly does matter if we do an update. And at that point, we have everything all hooked up and ready to go. So thank you very much for joining us. And if there's any questions that you have, or if you want to see videos on areas that we did not discuss, or if there's some clarification that is necessary, please feel to leave a comment, and we will address that in another video. Thank you and have a great day.